The march to the start of Ohio State spring ball is coming to an end, and there is no better way to celebrate on this first Friday of March than with a Freaky Friday mailbag. Welcome to The Beat, presented by the Waterworks. He is Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. I hope, Birm, that this is not coming across as inauthentic excitement from me. I know that sometimes there are accusations, deserved in some respects, about me being a press box snob, maybe even a curmudgeon doing this job as long as I have. I'm legitimately excited for spring football because I think there are a lot of things to learn and a lot of fascinating subplots. So this is not a fake enthusiasm that I may have had in other springs. Like even 2 years ago, there wasn't a whole lot of things that were going to happen in the Woody in 2024 with all those veterans coming back. This, I'm fired up for, and I mean it.
Yeah, I think it's just a different year. There's so many changes. There's 50 new players. There's all of the different coaches. There's all of the different philosophies of like what Ryan Day learned a year ago, what Arthur Smith brings in, what Matt Patricia gets to do now that he's extended for a longer contract, what his autonomy will be, like the changes even in the athletic department, like how we don't really know much about this spring as far as what we're going to be able to do and see. We know that we have a couple days of availability early next week, for the first couple days, and then we know nothing else. And so it's kind of, it's actually, it feels like a year where a lot of people who have covered this team for a long time go into it without knowing what to expect. And that's unusual because there has been such consistency around this program for so long that little changes, subtle changes in the way that we get to cover the team or what the Buckeyes decide to do with availability makes it different. And so at times, as awesome as this job is, it does get stagnant at points. But this spring, I don't think will be one of those stagnant moments. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I don't think so either. So we will have.
Also, hey, do you remember the old days? Remember
which ones?
The days when you had to like go to bed on Saturday night and you were like, oh man, I hope I don't forget to set my clocks forward.
Sure. Why?
Because now we don't have to like do it because our clocks all set themselves. And I was just thinking about how like much stress daylight savings time was in the old days. Before the internet.
Is that this weekend?
Yeah. The clocks jump ahead on Saturday night. So remember, America, to set your clocks forward. You're losing an hour of sleep. You're welcome.
That seems problematic with the Australian Grand Prix starting at 11 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday night. I could use a little different schedule for that. Rough start to the week. Oh, well. Thanks for reminding me. Do I remember?
I was just thinking about it. I'm like, man, I remember these days, and I used to like panic. I'm like, oh no, what if I forget to set my clock? Because like if you have a job, in the old days when you had to manually set your clocks, you'd be like, oh, what if I don't wake up in time? What if I wake up an hour late? What if I wake up an hour early? And now it's just like it's all just who cares? No one sleeps anyway.
And our phones, they've got us covered, and they're always listening. And we are listening to your questions in the mailbag. Thanks so much for sending those into us at the Austin Birm Show at gmail.com. You can send them in whenever you want. Doesn't have to be prompted for a specific Friday. You might give us an idea for a full show as we get rolling along here at the start of spring camp, which again is Tuesday. Birm mentioned the schedule. We do know we have an hour viewing period on Tuesday and an hour viewing period on Thursday. We will hear from Ryan Day after practice on Tuesday, and we will hear from Julian Sayin and Kenyatta Jackson on Thursday, just to give you a little jump start on what to expect for week one of spring camp. And then after that, the Buckeyes are on spring break. So it has gone back to the old model. I don't think that Ryan Day loved it once they got into it, where they got rid of the acclimation period before spring camp, and then they compressed it all into 4 weeks. Part of that was a reflection of the length of the season when they won the national championship. But I don't think you could tell after like 1 week he got into it. He's like, this is not going to work. So they are back to that old model going forward. So you can set your clocks and calendars to that as well as we get rolling. Aaron wanted to know, I think, did Aaron say, that he might have been the first time. We had several people writing in for the first time. We appreciate that. It's very cool to hear from you all. He had several superlatives that he wanted us to get into coming out of winter workouts. I don't know if I have great answers for all of them, but his question was, after finishing spring review for the team, can we end with final superlatives for this current roster? fastest player on the team, strongest player on the team, best dual sport athlete, freak of nature who steps off the bus and just looks different. I think the fastest player on the roster conversation is about to get a lot more competitive than it has been in a while, based on the addition of Devin McEwen, Legend Bay, Kyle Parker as well. Like this is a speedy bunch, Berm.
Yeah, that was the primary driver this offseason for Ohio State, as they wanted to look at rebuilding the roster and rebuilding the offense and finding some more explosivity. Legend Bay is a 10-3 guy in Texas on the 100-meter. Like that's pretty blistering fast. I don't know. This is, again, and it's not to be dismissive of Aaron's question or try to skirt it at all, but with 50 plus new players, like there's a lot of things we just don't know about these guys yet. We don't know who the best two-sport athlete is on the team. There's no like Jack Sawyer, Cade Stover types who you just knew were like freaky basketball players. I mean, Leroy Roker's up there, probably as far as like the best overall athlete, but I bet Jeremiah Smith would be great at pickleball if he played it,
You think?
Probably. I don't know why he wouldn't be, as long as he knows to stay out of the kitchen. The strongest player, I don't know. I mean, these are questions we just haven't.
I think it's Austin Sareveld.
I would think he's probably up there. Sareveld, Luke Montgomery in those conversations probably as well. Who do you want to be off the bus first on this team? I think is an interesting conversation, because the old days, you had the DeJuan Jones types, you had even guys like Jelani Thurman, who you look at it and see differently. But I
mean, Tegra, for all of the ups and downs, and
I said it all the time. Yeah, he was always the guy you
someone to come off the bus, and he would be scowling as well, because the first person that comes to mind for me, Berm, is still Edric Houston, but like he smiles a lot.
Yeah, he's joking too much.
It's not the tone that you necessarily want. I wonder. You brought that up a couple weeks ago. If some of the James Smith seriousness would rub off on Edric Houston, or maybe vice versa. They could lighten each other, maybe meet in the middle. I think that will be the fascinating thing to watch transpire, because you want it to be some of those defensive tackles, offensive linemen that are getting off. You're like, oh, we're in for it. Those are the guys in the trenches, and I don't want any part of that.
Yeah, and again, Aaron, I'm not trying to skirt the question, but this is the first offseason in the time I've covered this program that we didn't see the team at all from the end of the season until the first day of spring practice. So that there are just questions, and then you throw in the mass amounts of roster changes and transition. It's hard to know a lot of these things right now. But when you're dealing with the incoming freshmen, you've got 26 of the 27 signees already on campus. So we'll know some of those guys. But when you lose as much as Ohio State has lost in the last year, you lose some of the freaky athletes. The guy that was the fastest on the team was Lorenzo Styles. He's not there anymore. The guys who, Caden McDonald's the world, who were maybe the strongest pound for pound player on the team, is not there. We haven't had a chance every other offseason in the last decade or so. We've at least had an opportunity to meet with the incoming freshmen and transfers and get conversations with Mick Marotti to get some of those questions answered, to say like who took that leap this offseason. And we just haven't had those opportunities yet because of the way this offseason went. So let's make a promise
right now, Berm. So I think people have gathered that there is some off the record conversations going on with the coaching staff in the beat in the build up to spring ball. We'll be part of those. Looking very much forward to it. And then we'll have a week of spring ball where we'll be, even if we're not talking to the rest of the players beyond Julian Sain and Kenyatta Jackson, there tend to be some opportunities to get more information once we get back in the Woody. So let's make a promise to try and get some insight to answer these questions by the time we get to spring break.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I did one of the other questions that we'll touch on in this episode of The Beat and the Freaky Friday mailbag talks specifically about the freshmen, and I do have some insight into some of those conversations. So it's a little bit different there, but I don't want to just focus only on the freshmen in this conversation, because those aren't the guys who are going to be making an impact really on the team for the most part this season anyway. So Aaron's question is a good one, but we can't really answer it until next week, till we see those guys again.
And we will certainly try. All right. This question reminded me a little bit of one that we had a couple weeks ago about self-scouting, Berm. I thought it was interesting. It's going to be a little bit of a broken record where we say we can't really define an answer definitively, but Brad said he's a longtime listener and a first-time caller. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but Ohio State does not traditionally run many stunts under Larry Johnson. It seems more that he teaches moves to beat the man in front of you. That is correct. Indiana and Miami really had their way when they ran stunts against Ohio State's offensive line. Also correct. Do the Buckeyes get many meaningful practice reps against these kinds of stunts, not just against the scout team, but the kinds of players those schools had up front? I think the simple answer to that is no.
Yeah, I mean, why would the Buckeyes do a bunch of stuff in practice that they don't do in the games? That's probably the best way to answer it. Because obviously that's not ever really been Larry Johnson's MO. The way that he wants his defensive linemen to rush the passer has always been pretty traditionally straight up. We did see Ohio State try to mix in a little bit more defensive line movement this past season, more stunting, more twists, etc. I think that's why you saw guys like Caden Curry have the year that he had. I think, this conversation is not a new one. And Brad, I think, you and I both, Austin, have famously recalled conversations we had with Chase Young about the way that Ohio State wants its pass rushers to go after the quarterback. And then we had that conversation kind of reignited by Kenyatta Jackson last October when he said, hey, he wants to do more pass rush moves. He wants to be allowed to go get the quarterback a little bit more. I don't know why Ohio State has generally avoided that approach. I don't know if what Larry Johnson's philosophy is behind it. Maybe that's an answer we can get in these next couple of hours as well. Because I think that it is interesting because the game is changing, and you did see Indiana with less talented players absolutely dominate Ohio State's offensive line because the twists and the motions and the stunts and the way that they were able to confuse the eyes of not just the offensive line, but also of Julian Sayin. And so, again, as we talked about on Thursday with the special teams, and you maybe can get away 90% of the time without being great at some of this stuff or without doing some of the extras that Ohio State has traditionally not done. But you're getting to a point now in college football where it's a 16-team playoff. You're going to run into good teams in this NIL era, teams that maybe don't have as much talent, but they are smart. They are well prepared. And Indiana was the prime example of that in 2025. So I think we will see Matt Patricia continue to do more of this and push for more of this. But Larry Johnson's philosophy in the 25 years, 30 plus years that he's been a coach of defensive line in college football has never been to go that route.
Yeah. And I think if we're viewing this through the lens of the offensive line, like Brad is, which I think is entirely fair. It's not something that I had considered that much until I read the question in the comments, like, maybe that is something, to ask about both for Tyler Bowen or Justin Fry before that. Again, if we're talking about from the offensive line perspective, we know what Larry Johnson's philosophy is on defense. And I do think he's given a more collaborative effort with Matt Patricia than we'd seen from him previously in Larry Johnson's tenure. But, because I think about the play that immediately came to mind was not, yes, Indiana and Miami are still fresh and we can break that down. But like when Donovan Jackson got, destroyed on a stunt against Iowa and it wound up being their only points of the day on a forced fumble and CJ Stroud gets destroyed and it's returned for a touchdown. Yep. It's very out of character for Donovan Jackson to get beat like that. And it didn't happen a ton to him, but he saw something that maybe he had not repped as often in practice. So I think it's a fair question. Again, it's not one that I know that I can answer with any level of certainty, but I see the same thing that everybody else does. I can't just dismiss the idea because there's got to be some validity to it.
Yeah, I mean, and the reality is that was a problem that Donovan faced multiple times in his career. That example you're talking about in the 22 season, that happened to be a combination of it was Jack Campbell, the linebacker for Iowa, who's an All-American who, came free because of some stunts and stuff up front that Donovan was confused. But that happened to him a couple times. I remember specifically rehashing that play, saying, well, there it is again. Like that's what they're going to do. I'm surprised more teams haven't taken that approach against Ohio State in the last few years. But I guess the majority of the time, you still don't have good enough players to make it matter. Iowa certainly has good enough players, and Indiana had good enough players. Miami's had good enough players. But it's just the changing of football. Like you can't generally just beat your guy straight up anymore. The way that offenses are designed to get rid of the ball quickly, the way that most of these schemes are set up now, it doesn't allow you a lot of time to just do one-on-one pass moves and win on the outside. You have to be able to get up the middle and affect the passer from the middle of the offensive line, and that's where great teams always dominate, and that's where it's, offensive lines are trying to figure out how to mitigate that, how to fix that. So it is a good question. I appreciate that from Brad. I think we definitely do need to ask that question, because that became a fairly important topic of conversation when it came down to the Indiana Miami games.
Yeah. All right. So we'll add that one to the list for sure. This came in from Brian. Could you please explain, as best you know, the process for how the networks pick their games ahead of the season? Is there a draft-like process? My reason for asking is I want to have hope that the Oregon game is not at noon. Do you want me to dive into this one?
This is an Austin Ward special. This is not something I know anything about. I know that you're going to say, we believe it likely that Oregon game will be a night game. I know that you're going to say that, but
I'm not going to say that.
Man.
Now the answer to, does Brian have hope that the game is not at noon? I will say that the answer to that is yes. All right. And there is also a draft. So the way that this works is around the end of April, beginning of May, Fox and BTN, which are effectively the same, and the Big Ten has an ownership in that, CBS and NBC will get together. There are 11 weeks that they will be drafting, and Fox controls the first 3 of those 11. So they will take the selection. It does not go by game, it goes by week. So last week of the regular season is basically Fox. That's their number 1 pick every single year. We know that it's Ohio State, Michigan, and they announced that well in advance. But Fox gets the first 3 selections of that. Then the 4th pick will rotate on a year-by-year basis with CBS and NBC. My understanding is that this year, the 4th pick, it is CBS's turn, which is why that leads me to think that maybe it won't be a night game, but it won't be at noon. I'll get to that in a second. But Fox owns 5 of the first 11 picks, and CBS and NBC have the remaining 6, 3 each for those teams. So what I try to do, Birm, for this question, and I've been looking at this in advance, even though these weeks are selected well in advance, you still have the 12-day window or 6-day window once you get into the season. Again, that gives the flexibility. They're trying to find the best broadcast windows that they can when they have their selection. So Fox, let's say, we know what number 1 is going to be, Ohio State and Michigan, the game. I suspect strongly that Ohio State at Indiana is going to be a second selection that week, but targeted to get that game. Then it becomes a question of what does Fox want to use their 3rd draft pick on, and when would they use it? If you're looking at the other options here, and there are 5 or 6 other games I think that you can put in the same quality bucket as Ohio State and Oregon, the one that stands out on a week schedule and a unique opportunity is Michigan hosting Oklahoma in week 2. Now, I don't think that Fox would want to let that slide to anybody else, because then they would be left with basically nothing else to put on Big Noon Saturday. So if I am correct in my mock draft of the broadcast schedule, CBS would then be sitting there with the 4th pick. Ohio State is always going to be the top of the board selection for any week, regardless of opponent. But if you are trying to pencil that out and also look at a schedule that then would set up for that week, the other options are Michigan, Michigan State, and Penn State at Washington. That sounds like a pretty good schedule to have Big Noon, have the big brother, little brother showdown.
Especially huge first-year new coaches, both of them.
Yeah, intrigue. Fox would like that as a backup option. NBC can't really be involved in that because that game is in Seattle. Perfect primetime opportunity for them. But I think sandwiched right in the middle and a golden opportunity for CBS. This is the game they want. This is the one they're going to build around all year, would be Ohio State, Oregon. So I think now, Birm, I could be wrong, because Ohio State may want a night game and they may try and, push some pieces around, because they can trade. The draft picks can be traded just like, draft picks can be in real life. This is real life, but it's also, broadcast deals. So it's a little more nebulous. But I think if I'm standing here right now, my mock draft would be a 3:30 kickoff.
Which would be great. That's an ideal scenario for the fan, I think. Not for the coverer of the game. We'd prefer night or noon. Noon or night would be fine. 3:30 is the worst of both worlds for everything that we have to do. But I think, Brian, the bottom line here is that it seems like that won't be a noon game right now. Like
I
logically,
hope so. Yeah.
logically, it seems like it won't be.
Because again, if not, that means that either Fox didn't take Ohio State, Indiana, or it
Which is unlikely.
Or it didn't take Michigan and Oklahoma. And
how different is a noon game at Ohio Stadium for Oregon than a 3:30 game?
I don't know. I mean, you and I've kind of disagreed over this at times over the years. I think it's all opponent based and not kickoff time based, and maybe not all, but largely.
No, I don't mean this. I don't mean the crowd. I mean for Oregon's performance.
Oh, body clocks.
Do body clocks matter? And is there, if you had to choose, if you were Ohio State and you were told it's either noon or 3:30, wouldn't you rather play it at noon?
Ohio State likes noon games.
Yeah, I know that, and then you get the body clock issue. Oregon's not as, I think that again, we're really getting into the weeds of that, but like, I think that's part of the conversation. Like, yeah, obviously from an atmosphere, from a recruiting standpoint, you're going to want that game at night or as late in the day as you can. But it's also November 7th. And so you don't know what you're going to get weather-wise. And so there might be the other side of it, which is like, hey, let's just get it out of the way where it might be 55 degrees and sunny instead of 35 and whatever. You know what I like? Processes. I like processes, Austin. I like processes that tell you how things work, like that's what Austin just detailed. It was how these conversations work between the Big Ten and its football television partners. We have partners like Awaken 180, weightloss.com. They showed myself and Austin the processes of how things work, how our bodies work, how our brains work when it comes to food, how we make better choices by making better choices. And it's funny because when you start making better choices, you start making better choices. Like I've still only had fast food one time in the 4.5 weeks now that I've been on maintenance mode with Awaken 180. I actually weighed myself on Thursday morning and I weigh less than I did when I got into maintenance mode.
Wow.
Pretty crazy. And it's because I've just been taught how to better plan my day, how to better plan my meals, how to eat smarter. Awaken180weightloss.com. They have a great app. They have great coaches. They have everything you need to take control of your own weight loss journey. Mine was easy. I think yours would be too. Go to awaken180weightloss.com.
Absolutely. So if that from Brian was primarily a question for me, I suspect this from Zane will largely be for you, Birm. Although I have been writing a fair amount about basketball in the last few weeks and talking about it on 97.1 The Fan and 10 TV and 10 TV Plus, along with Adam King and Brandon Beam and many others. But this, I like the way that Zane prefaced it because he said it was basically a one-time-a-year shot here. March Madness is here, so thought now is a good time for the annual basketball review. For the few remaining basketball fans of the Bucks, should Ohio State fire Jake Diebler after this season if the team fails to make the NCAA tournament? I'll say right now, I'd be stunned if they don't make the tournament, so I don't know if we have to worry about it. I also think that Jake Diebler is going to return either way, but that's not necessarily what Zane is asking.
Yeah, and the reality is, Zane, like I think that you preface the question in a way that really cuts to the heart of it. For the few remaining basketball fans, like, does it matter to those people if Jake Diebler is fired or not if they don't make the tournament? And my thought is this. Obviously, again, we're in year 2 of Jake Diebler as the full-time head coach at Ohio State. I don't think for the program's long-term success, it makes sense to fire coaches after 2 years who are trying to rebuild a program. I want to be clear about that. That said, I also think that there is a real conversation to be had about what should ever be accepted at Ohio State. And when you're talking about 4-5 straight seasons without making the NCAA tournament, I don't think at that point anything is off the table. The reality is Ohio State should never be anything worse than a top 25 program in the country in basketball. I don't give a crap about it. Like, I don't expect the Buckeyes to win national championships. I don't expect them to be competing with Michigan State or Purdue or, even Michigan right now as far as winning the Big Ten. But there is no excuse for the Ohio State basketball program to not be a top 25 program every single year. The Buckeyes, NIL-wise, may not be at the top of the sport when it comes to in basketball, but I guarantee you they're better than 90% of the nation. I guarantee that. I guarantee you they have more access to players. There's better talent in Ohio than there are most places around the country. I think whatever Ross Bjork and the rest of the athletic departments decide, they have to ask the question of what are we going to accept at Ohio State? And it has been a mediocre basketball program for the last decade. It's a hard sport to recruit. The one and dones make everything funky. There obviously NIL changes things. There's 300 plus teams around the country. It's not the same as football. I get it, but Ohio State has more resources and more talent and more commitment from its fan base, even the few remaining fans, people like me who don't ever talk about basketball, who love Ohio State basketball. Like, there is a point when you have to ask yourself, what do we accept? And I don't believe that a coach should be fired after 2 years when he comes into a mess of a program like Jake Diebler did. I also think it is idiotic not to remind ourselves that Jake Diebler was a part of the program before. And so it was a really risky decision by Ross Bjork and Gene Smith when Ross took over and Gene was departing to just promote a guy from a staff that you had just fired the head coach of. It's weird to me to do that. And so I guess some of the way that I view this is a little bit tainted, different than I would if Jake Diebler was an outside hire like Michigan did with Dusty May or something like that.
I also think Birm, like, I don't disagree with any part of that. I think there are signs of Jake Diebler growing into that role throughout this year as it's gone on. My single biggest problem with this version of the team, which again I think is going to make the tournament, is in position to make the tournament right now, has a resume that should qualify as long as they can.
If they win one more game, they're going to be in the tournament. One
more game, whether that's this weekend or next, I think they're going to be in. But like, because there's been a conversation, you had Gus Johnson talking about on the broadcast a few weeks ago that all the money's going to Ryan Day. Hey, President Carter, Ross Bjork, give some to Jake Diebler and the basketball Buckeyes. Like, as you said, they're not funding it at the absolute highest level of the sport, nor should they, based on what that would mean to the football program, which needs more allocation. But this is not a poverty basketball program either, or else Bruce Thornton, quite frankly, would not have spent 4 years at Ohio State in the transfer portal, free transfer, NIL era. He would have been long gone long ago. So he's one example of that, but I think he's a clear example of the spending that does occur on this roster. I think that there have been missed evaluations in the transfer portal and that this roster wasn't constructed perfectly. However, when I say that I'm still seeing progress on that front from Jake Diebler as a coach, outside of the last 30 minutes, which were horrifying to watch at Iowa, and being overwhelmed late against Michigan in the second matchup, I don't believe that this team has ever stopped playing hard for Jake Diebler. Yeah. I think that you've seen more creativity in the way that they're coached, whether that's on the defensive end or the offensive end, than we saw from Chris Holtmann. And I think that the team reflects that they have good leadership in place. That's not just because I want it to be true. That's what I feel. That's what I'm seeing. Yeah. And does that mean that they're going to win a national championship under Jake Diebler? I highly doubt it. But can they get to what you're talking about, an acceptable level of success? I don't see any reason that they can't.
Yeah, I think that point is vital here. Like, the guys on that team clearly love Jake Diebler. They play their butts off. They work extremely hard. There's been some bad luck. I was joking watching the game on Wednesday night with my brothers, do they just have one walking boot that they pass around at practice? And like, oh, today's Puff's turn to wear the walking boot. Oh, Tilly, your turn. Like the Brandon Knoll, did his leg get amputated? Like, what happened? We're like, oh, he's out indefinitely, but we're not going to tell you why. Like, did he lose a limb? Like, there's obviously been some bad luck here. John Mobley breaking his finger, there's just stuff you're like, well, the worst 3 games in the season for you to not have Junie were the games he missed. And then Devin gets the flu. And then misses the Michigan State game where you were back and forth with Michigan State, like basically with 4 players on your roster. Like, there is a lot of positives. They have more wins this season in the Big Ten than they've had in 4 years. Like, there are things working in the right direction, but you also now need to make sure that you have someone that is an adequate replacement for Bruce Thornton on your roster, and you don't. So now you have to spend money to get that guy. And to your point, Bruce Thornton has made himself a fairly decent amount of money in his time at Ohio State, but you need a point guard and you need a big man in the Big Ten, otherwise you can't win. And Ohio State has failed to get a big man that can actually physically compete in the Big Ten. They went and made an attempt to do that this year with Christoph Tilly, who is clearly not a physical enough player to be a real day in, day out dude in the Big Ten. So there are pieces in place. You've got a really, really good recruiting class coming in. You've got a 5-star in Anthony Thompson coming in to play alongside Junie and Devin and Amari Bynum, hopefully, because again, we don't know, like, guys leave. Like, this is the way it works. I mean, the money is going to come in from elsewhere. Guys from Nebraska who are at Ohio State and the Cornhuskers are putting a lot of money into their basketball program. You just never know. Like, the pieces are there. Like, you just have to have a little bit of luck and you need to have a little bit of patience. And I think Jake Diebler, for all of the reasons that I didn't want him to be hired, I think he's done a really okay job learning on the fly. But if you don't make the tournament next year with all these pieces and you go 1-and-out this year, like, I don't know. I don't know how much more you can accept. That's the bottom line.
Yeah. No, I think that,
should they fire him? I don't think so.
Yeah, I think they went into this with like a 3-year tolerance. But I would say that they're probably like slightly ahead of that schedule right now with Jake Diebler, if I'm being honest about it, based on all the reasons that you outlined with a first-year coach and at a point where the program was not just accepting mediocrity, but like maybe even less than that from Chris Holtman, at least in my estimation. All right, the bonus question this week comes from Tyler. He knows how to find the spot with the tacking on the wrestling question. We'll take the first part for you, Birm. As of today, there's no practice scene, but based on intel and your own personal beliefs, how many of the incoming freshmen burn their red shirts this year, and who will be the first to lose their black stripe?
Red shirts don't matter. So I'm not even going to worry about that.
Off to a good start.
Who will be the first to lose their black stripe?
I guess the question is, how many do you think would redshirt? And I think that's like no more than 4.
I think it is likely that Ohio State will, let's just go down the list. Luke Fahey will not be a major part of this team this year. Favor Aki will not be. Legend Bay will be. Chris Henry Jr. will be. I think Jaquaden Guilford might be. Maybe Sam Greer gets into the 2 deep on the offensive line. Kari Wilder will have to play. Sincere Johnson may very well be in that rotation. Jordan.
Special teams at a minimum, I would think.
Jay Timmons and Jordan Thomas, I think, will both be in the rotation by the end of the season at cornerback. Maybe not to the point where they're like getting equal reps, but they will be over their 4-game limit of playing. And I think Blaine Bradford will be. So how many is that? 10 guys that I think will not redshirt.
You've made this point before, especially in this era of investment, and where eligibility doesn't matter. It seems we're at least on the precipice of 5 for 5. Yeah. So I don't think Ohio State will hold anything back in terms of redshirts. If guys have chances to play, I think they'll play them all.
I don't know why they wouldn't. Just the way the schedule sets up, it's not exactly a year where you have a ton of opportunity to just get guys Big Ten reps later in the year. Like, you don't have a lot of those matchups. What I mentioned earlier in the show, talking about the superlatives about different players, is that the buzz around Legend Bay is like pretty real. Like, and again, we talked about it when we went over the running back room in the preview, because he's just going to be forced to be out there because not a lot of other guys are. But the conversation around him does not seem to be slowing down or tempering at all based on his 8 weeks in the program so far and what he's done in the weight room, what he's done in workouts. The same thing for Chris Henry Jr. Again, Timmons and Jordan Thomas are 2 other guys that I've been told specifically had really stepped up and like kind of opened some eyeballs. But I think Kari Wilder will be in that conversation by the end of spring. But it's really not a lot of guys.
I think, as you said,
Legend's going to be the first to lose the black stripe.
I was going to say Legend Bay is going to get the stripe off, and I think it's going to happen on Student Appreciation Day. That feels like the right sweet spot for it.
Well, I mean, if we go back, Jeremiah lost his after like 3 days of practice.
He was born without a black stripe.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, how many other freshmen have lost their black stripe by that point in their first thing? I don't know. It's funny because the black stripe is something that like it's just kind of a fun thing to talk about, but I don't know that there's any real correlation to that in long-term success at Ohio State, but it certainly seems like I remember very, very specifically in the fall or winter of 2021 when Marvin got there, people were like, whoa, dude, like this is different than we expected. And that was the feedback from JJ. That has been the initial response of Legend Bay as well. So like, that's where I'm like, oh, okay, this is not hyperbole. This is not, but like 10-3, 5'8", 210 pounds dude running the 10-3 at that size. They're going to find ways to use him in this offense. And I'm excited to see it starting next week.
Well, I refer to the number one rule of snap judgments and the beat presented by the Waterworks. Ryan Day doesn't make accidents into a live microphone. And on the coaches show, especially, there's plenty of time for him to sidestep the hyperbole. He doesn't operate in hyperbole. And when he's calling him a poor man's Tyreek Hill, I was like, okay, this stuff is not just like, we're not just private. Hey, look out for this guy. We're taking it fully public before the first practice of spring. So,
and it's awesome because what other guy will Ohio State fans want to root for more than Legend Bay after the way that his signing and commitment and everything happened? Like he's going to be a guy that people are like earnestly rooting for. So I hope that it plays out.
Yeah. And delaying, I think, to go back to the start of the show, not talking to the early enrollees or the transfer guys, his saga might have been part of the reason not to do that, because you don't want to have him go out for the first time and talk about everything that he went through. And it's like, well, if you can't do it for one, maybe just don't let any of them do it. I get it. I'm not meaning that as a criticism of the program or upset about it. Like, I think they all deserved a break after the length of the season or the chaos of January. So I know it's also why I'm ready for Tuesday and to get back into the routine.
I mean, there's a lot of that, though. I mean, it could have been the same situation with Chris Henry Jr. and the Brian Hartline departure. And, you don't want the first meeting of all of these kids in their Ohio State careers to be focused on negative things and BS that is outside of their control.
Yeah. All right. So the bonus, if you want to turn off before the wrestling question comes in, feel free to do so. We'll talk to you on Monday. If not, I was asked by Tyler how the Elimination Chamber was in person in Chicago last week for my birthday. He saw the pictures of Randy Orton wearing Liberty's Chelsea green hat. How cool. It was awesome. So we did adjust our plans for PLE season for WWE because we were going to take Liberty to WrestleMania before Ohio State's spring game was moved to April 18th. So I thought, well, I sold those tickets. Let's put that towards a little bit better experience at the Chamber. We sat in the fourth row, right by the Chamber itself, right by the ring, and it was phenomenal. Not just because of the way it ended, but even before it started, Kathy Kelly walked over there to ask for some fans to gather around for her hit before things started on ESPN. Liberty had said on Friday, I'd never heard her say this before, but it was a great premonition. She said she wanted to have Kathy Kelly's job. I don't think she wants to do what we do, Birm. She doesn't want to talk about Ohio State football, although she does sometimes at Roosters, the fun casual joint. But anyway, the next day, Kathy Kelly just starts walking over to her. I said, well, that Lib, there she is. She goes, I said, go talk to her. She said, I want your job. And Kathy Kelly kind of laughed and said, okay, that sounds great. What's your name? Talk to her for a little bit. And then she starts that broadcast by saying, I'm here. These fans are awesome in Chicago. I was just informed by Liberty that she wants my job. And I was like, this is awesome. So the whole night was great. The atmosphere was awesome down there. Danhausen's arrival, I think, was a little bit of a letdown for us, but Randy winning, Rhea winning was phenomenal. And then everything that happened after that with Liberty going viral, at least on WWE channels, for her hat and Randy putting it on and modeling that was as cool as you could ask for. A great birthday celebration and a phenomenal Chamber on the road to WrestleMania.
I didn't watch it, but I bet it was fun.
It was. You were in Indianapolis. You were already into football season.
That's right. I was down the street from the NFL Combine watching high school football players run.
How was it?
It's fine. It's nice that the opening's back. I mean, it's a cool event. I think that it's interesting that Nike has realized that they probably are. When you start to see Jeremiah Smith signing with Adidas and Chris Henry Jr. signing with Adidas and Adidas's role in all of these 7-on-7 tournaments around the country, and Nike all of a sudden going, wait a second, we can give these kids money now. Let's do it. So, I mean, I know, I suspect that's the motivation, but any opportunity for these kids to get out and compete is good. Any opportunity for us to get a chance to evaluate players. I'm not a talent evaluator, but you can walk into a room and of 400 high school football players and pretty quickly find who the 10 or 11 best ones are. It's a pretty remarkable way that works out. But awesome to be back in the buildings. The Colts training facility where we were at on Sunday was pretty cool. Cold. Not better outdoor facility or indoor than the Bengals have for sure. But overall, like I thought it was a great first weekend to get back into the swing of things for camp season coming up. Looking forward to like the Under Armour camps and stuff in Ohio at the end of April, and we're just back to life. Can't wait.
Fully back in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center on Tuesday. We will kick off that week as we always do with a Bourne Blitz. We'll have Talking Tuesday with the King to preview that first day of camp. And then, that's right, Snappy Jays with Birm and I will be back. Can't wait to dig into all that and everything that's going to be happening over the next 6 weeks. Thanks for joining us on this last week pre-spring camp on a Freaky Friday edition of The Beat presented by the Waterworks. He's Birm. I'm Austin. Have a fantastic weekend, folks.